This is the first interview in our Perspective series where I'm talking to industry leaders about what is driving change in global markets and how the relocation industry is responding and preparing for the future. I'm talking today to Bill Graebel, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Graebel, which is well known for its huge presence in the international removals, that's household goods shipping, but it's also a leading international relocation management company, extending its services not only to the North American market, but to Asia and Europe and beyond, serving 165 countries. Bill, welcome to London. This is the busy conference season. This week I've just attended the CIPD's annual conference, and it seems that there are a lot of common themes and debates going on about how businesses respond to global growth, reach new markets and manage global teams. The success of any business organisation, I think we'd all agree, is about the people, and people are very much at the heart of global mobility, but it is very complex. So firstly, tell us a bit about your business and how you're responding to changes in the marketplace and what they are. Perhaps economic factors, emerging markets, social or political influences, demographic changes, anything that comes to mind.
Well, thank you, Fiona. It's a pleasure to be here. And in terms of how we're looking at the market these days, I think one of the key attributes we're trying to have is agility, because the rate of change and the demographic shifts and the corporate competition out there in all those industries are requiring companies to be ever more agile. And so as a key link in their talent mobility strategy, we too then have to be agile. So that really relates to infrastructure, that relates to product development, that relates to the design of our technology systems, but it also really comes back to our people. Because if our people don't have a mindset of agility, then we will as an organization be slow to adapt. And so as we look at the future, I think the way that we're planning on having an agile workforce is by making sure we have great connectivity with our people and they understand the mission of the organization, the needs of the clients, and then that we're providing them with the opportunities to grow the skills and deploy the tools that enable them to feel like they win in their jobs every day. Because that's really important in terms of engagement. The workforce that you deploy has to feel like they're winning and going home and feeling successful as opposed to just toiling away at a job.
And what about your clients? What do you think their biggest challenges are at the moment?
Well, I think they face many of the same challenges, which, whether it's regulatory pressures, whether it's, unrest in certain regions of the world, whether it's market volatility and commodity prices go down or up, or and everyone trying to figure out what are the preferences of the new age consumer. It's just a really fertile time of change, and I think as you look to the future, the companies that prepare and equip their organizations to be most adaptive and to be foresightful and to be agile are the consumer brands and the products and corporations that are really going to see tremendous success in the years ahead.
So lots of opportunities then, yeah.
No doubt, and then there are these amazing companies out there like Airbnb or Uber or Alibaba that are just blowing up traditional paradigms of how consumers, acquire a service or consume a product. And those paradigm shifts and change and access to goods and markets and customer experiences, it really creates a flat playing field for everybody, customer and provider, consumer and producer alike. And so these are great times we live in, but it's not to say they're necessarily easy or all the answers are easily identifiable. And that's again why I think agility is such an important attribute for any of us, whether in the workforce or just as a member of society in general.
So you're being asked to be more strategic, more consultative in your approach, do you think? Oh,
no question. And I suppose the Holy Grail is everybody's looking for somebody that's got the crystal ball on where the certainty is in the future. But yes, and to be maybe a little more serious, there are some lovely tools these days in the technology arena that enable you to get into a more predictive analytical kind of context that whether you're talking about big data and synthesizing it into trends that then predict, what would be the most effective design of relocation policies, where are the best places to be recruiting people from, what is the optimal duration of an assignment based upon the assignee type, are there different locations and policies and kinds of jobs that will more greatly precipitate career development, effectiveness while on assignment, or otherwise retention and promotability in the organization. For years and years and years, a lot of that was just the gut feel of supervisors or the responsiveness to a business need that needed to fill a vacancy. And I think a huge change we'll see in the years ahead is more and more the use of analytics will at least try to shrink the range of variables that hopefully lead to more predictable and accurate outcomes, because in the event of an assignment not really being a right fit for a transferee, whether it's they can't fulfill the assignment or they aren't as productive, the cost mounts really fast for these companies. And so, most markets are so efficient and hyper-competitive right now that you really can't control cost without reducing benefits. There's a diminishing point of return in that game. That rock has been squeezed pretty hard for a while now. And so to drive cost out really comes down to squeezing out as much of the variation around things that cause failed assignments or impair productivity. And I think that's where you're going to see analytics become a big part of the state of the art of how relocation, and frankly human resources, designs and deploys its policies in the future.
So what about the future of mobility and global mobility in that picture? If there's far more virtual working, or do you see that there's always going to be a place?
Certainly traditional types of relocation, I think, it's evident. There are fewer long-term permanent transfers or expatriate types of assignments. But then the flip side of that is there's a lot more developmental assignments and short-term assignments and rotational assignments that are all part of career development. And that's what a lot of the young workforce want. You're able to attract the best talent if you can keep the opportunities and the locations and the exposures to new and different things exciting and in a compounding way, kind of building credentials and competencies. So there is a certain part of mobility that you could argue is going to actually have an increasing velocity. But when you look at it in terms of the permanence of lots of stuff to move and setting down roots and things like that were maybe more of the traditional model, that will always be there for a certain strata of employee in a given company. But I actually think you're going to see a certain amount of almost this hybrid thing between extended business travel, short-term assignments, and rotational programs that are utilized by leading employers to be, in a sense, talent magnets and a means of keeping their workforce engaged.
Also, what's on trend? Diversity, inclusion, developing women leaders. Just briefly, tell us, what are your views on that? I know you've been reading exciting things, like I think you've sponsored the first ever Women on the Move session at a removals industry conference in South Africa. And of course you have a white paper on the challenges of dual career couples. So perhaps you just briefly explain why you think inclusion and diversity are so important.
Yeah, well, for number one, a lot of obvious reasons, but in terms of I'll answer that, Fiona, first from the lens of as an employer. If you look across our workforce, probably 65 to 70% of our workforce is women. So if you don't have a strategy for diversity, inclusion, and development, oh my gosh, what kind of an employer are you actually going to be for the majority of your workforce, right? So in some ways, I think it's just appropriate and necessary to act on those things as opposed to just talk about those things and write policies that demonstrate, egalitarity or whatever. Policies and words are one thing, but your actions, your behaviors, and are you really diving in? And being proactive in that regard. So now as a service provider, I think it's fair to say incrementally we're seeing every year more and more of the transferee is a person who is female, as opposed to the traditional model, was a male and there was a partner, a trailing spouse, assumingly female. And I'm sorry I don't have a data point on what is the male to female ratio in our transferee portfolio, but I don't think I'm very far off if I said it was 60-40 male to female, where maybe 20 years ago it was 85-15. So the whole notion about women on the move is, well, I suppose you would say it's a metaphor cutting across multiple dimensions of, yes, the increased frequency in a transferee profile. Yes, in terms of, frankly, a key part of every organization's strategy to build future leaders for all the right reasons. And then, from a standpoint of like purchasing power, women as a part of society as a whole, generally speaking, have way more purchasing power than they did just 15, 20 years ago. So if you're selling, consumer products or gasoline, it really doesn't matter. Your whole branding notion has to be more and more inclusive around who are your customers. And it's not just, market to men and the women have no other option and they'll have to buy that product anyway. It's almost a reverse psychology today, is if you can get the pull-through and the brand loyalty and seen as a new brand that really identifies and was purpose-built for the needs or aspirations or preferences of a woman. I think those are some of the leading-edge marketing strategies today of some of the most effective companies.
And it would be great to see more female international assignees. I think they've been flat tracking for a while, so hopefully the industry will respond to some good ways of supporting them. Well, thank you very much, Bill. That's been a brilliant cant around all these different changes and opportunities. Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to speaking to you.
Thank you, Fiona. My pleasure.